Hi, this is Ozzy, the Crater Man, and I must confess that I'm a little bit disappointed. I had prepared a lengthy diatribe on Donald Trump's support of waterboarding and other forms of torture. My comments were to dovetail nicely with my overarching theme that this man is not normal. Donald Trump has expressed not only a support for waterboarding, which is manifestly illegal and prohibited by treaties that we signed under President Ronald Reagan, but he also opined that we should employ methods that are much worse and much stronger.
But they asked me the question, what do you think of waterboarding? Absolutely fine, but we should go much stronger than waterboarding.
We have to be so strong. We have to fight so viciously and violently because we're dealing with violent people.
As far as I'm concerned, waterboarding is absolutely fine, but we should go much further.
And why did he feel that torture is necessary? Well, you tell me. Maybe it was something about chopping off heads.
They're chopping off our heads in the Middle East. They're chopping off heads. When you're fighting an enemy that chops off heads.
But they can do chopping off heads.
It's not the American way to have heads chopped off.
They're chopping off heads. They're chopping off the heads of Christians. We have an enemy in the Middle East that's chopping off heads.
Throughout the Middle East, they're chopping off heads of Christians.
Gotcha, Donald. Thanks for letting us know. So I assumed that Donald had engaged in almost no thinking or reading about this issue before disgorging his opinion on adoring crowds of low-information voters.
And I got a standing ovation. Standing ovation.
I'm sure you did. So in the spirit of education, I prepared gigabytes of history and commentary about the futility and moral leprosy of torture. Imagine my somehow perverse disappointment that less than 2 weeks after his election, as the next president of the United Fricking States of America, Donald Trump has already abandoned the position he brayed about endlessly throughout his benighted campaign. Evidently he talked to some guy, and now says he was wrong about it all along.
General Mattis is a strong, highly dignified man. I met with him at length, and I asked him that question. I said, what do you think of waterboarding? He said, I was surprised. He said, I've never found it to be useful. He said, I've always found, give me a pack of cigarettes and a couple of beers, and I do better with that than I do with torture.
And so now Donald Trump has kicked out from under my feet his once apparently unshakable belief in the appropriateness of waterboarding, or something even worse.
Believe me, we should go much stronger. Waterboarding is fine, but it's not nearly tough enough, okay?
Donald, you have embarrassed me. Like your legions of gullible supporters, I assumed that there existed some core of actual belief in your pronouncements. I thought I might need to factually and philosophically refute in some detail your position in order to effect a shift in your thinking. Well, silly me. Evidently you talked to some guy and no longer believe in anything you said before. What am I supposed to do with all of this material? For example, when you said this,
You know, you have to fight fire with fire.
I was prepared to answer with the words of George Washington. Following the Battle of Trenton in 1776, Washington was presented with hundreds of Hessian prisoners, and he said this: "Let them have no reason to complain of our copying the brutal example of the British Army in their treatment of our unfortunate brethren who have fallen into their hands." And when you said this,
They're allowed to chop off the heads of people.
I was prepared to answer as follows. No, Donald, ISIS is not allowed to cut off heads. In fact, this savage behavior is prohibited by every known law and religious tenet of civilized society around the globe, including the Muslim faith. In actuality, ISIS is not allowed to cut off heads, but they do it anyway. We, on the other hand, have historically held ourselves to a higher standard of behavior than our adversaries, in which we eschew torture and mistreatment, in order to demonstrate that we, at least, are not brutal savages from the 12th century. That is why we are we, and they are they, and why at least some of the world still respects our moral authority. But all of that is now irrelevant, as you have changed your mind. You no longer believe that torture is a good idea because you talked to some guy. I think it will be fascinating to see what other guys you talk to, and what other of your alleged core beliefs turn out to have been spontaneous improvisations, manipulative lies, or fatuous blather that will be instantly defenestrated now that you have become the president. But that will have to be a topic for a future video, if indeed there is a future. Let's just spend a few final moments pondering the incendiary things Donald said about torture over the last full fucking year, but apparently no longer believes because he talked to some guy.
We're going to have to do things that are unthinkable, almost unthinkable.
We're living in medieval times.
Believe me, it works. And you know what? If it doesn't work, they deserve it anyway for what they're doing to us.
I would like to strengthen the laws so that we can better compete.
And yes, in case you're wondering, he did mean compete with ISIS in an arms race of brutal mistreatment of captives. But anyway, he evidently no longer believes any of that stuff. Ah, Donald, what's next? No prosecution of Hillary Clinton? Say it ain't so, man.